It had been a long day, one that felt like it could never end. The harsh sun on the alien planet, the tense political meetings, the constant motion from one duty to another. It was all draining. Yet tonight was different. Tonight, the soldiers of Earth stationed on this distant world had been given a rare moment of peace. This was supposed to be a night of rest, a night to forget about the war, to forget about the pressure. And for the soldier named Alex, it was a welcome relief. But peace, as he learned, wasn't always so simple. After a celebration in the Grand Hall with the other soldiers and diplomats, Alex felt his eyes growing heavy. He had been part of the delegation sent to the Queen's planet to help strategize the coming battles. But tonight, after a few too many drinks and too much talking, the thought of rest was all that mattered. As the soldiers began to retire for the night, Alex's mind started to lose its sharpness. The long corridors of the palace twisted and turned in confusing directions. It had been a while since he had gotten used to the layout of the place, and with each passing step, his fatigue took over. His eyes drooped, and he hardly noticed where his feet were taking him. He pushed open a door and stepped inside, thinking it was his room. The door had been unlocked, and the soft light from the hallway faded behind him. The bed in the corner seemed familiar, though in his tired state he wasn't certain. He pulled off his boots and laid himself down, his body aching for sleep. In just moments, the warmth of the blankets wrapped around him, and Alex drifted off, not noticing the heavy royal curtains hanging on the windows or the regal furniture around the room. Somewhere in the distance, the Queen was finishing her duties, her long day of meetings, discussions, and overseeing the affairs of her planet had left her exhausted as well. Yet the weight of her title and the eyes of her people kept her from rest. She had retreated to her quarters, seeking a moment of privacy, a rare thing for someone in her position. But as she moved through the darkened halls, her thoughts continued to swirl. She entered her room, tired, but not yet ready to sleep. The Queen had spent the day attending to delicate matters of diplomacy, trying to keep her people united despite the growing tensions. She hadn't had a moment to herself for days, and now, alone in the quiet of her chambers, she planned to relax. But as she moved to her bed, she noticed something strange. There, resting on the bed, was a man. A soldier from Earth, if she wasn't mistaken. He had clearly made a mistake in his exhaustion. She had been in meetings all day, so she hadn't heard the commotion when the soldiers had been guided to their rooms. Her quarters were meant to be off limits to the soldiers, and yet, there he was, sleeping soundly. The Queen hesitated for only a moment, surprised by the unexpected presence. But then a chuckle escaped her lips. It was a strange feeling, this mix of confusion and amusement. She had seen many things in her life, but never had she come across a soldier, lost in the halls, finding his way to her bed. The Queen, without waking him, decided to let it be. Perhaps this was the universe's strange sense of humor. She moved toward the other side of the room, intending to take a seat and enjoy a moment of peace before retiring herself. She didn't plan to disturb him, but her gaze kept returning to the soldier. Despite the strange situation, she found herself feeling a sense of calm she hadn't felt in ages. As the minutes passed, her tired eyes grew heavier, and the Queen found herself sinking deeper into her thoughts. The man on the bed, the soldier who had somehow found his way into her room, was still fast asleep. She had expected to be more annoyed, but instead she simply felt a peacefulness that she hadn't experienced in a long time. Her thoughts wandered for a moment, and before she knew it, the Queen's feet had carried her closer to the bed. She had not meant to fall asleep, but the weariness of the day had gotten the best of her. She sat down on the bed, still not fully aware of what was happening. In her fatigue, she leaned against the soft blankets beside the soldier, her head falling gently to his chest without realizing it. The warmth of his body, the comfort of the bed, and the heaviness of the day all took their toll, and so the Queen fell asleep, resting her head on the chest of a stranger, a soldier who had wandered into the wrong bed. It was an odd twist of fate, and neither of them had any idea how the morning would change everything. Meanwhile, Alex, deep in his slumber, was completely unaware of the change in his surroundings. The soldier lay motionless, still breathing steadily, his face calm in the dreamless night. The Queen, too, was unaware of how this small, accidental moment would come to define the rest of their lives. For now, there was only peace, the peace that came after a long day of struggles, the peace that only sleep could bring. The two of them, from different worlds, different lives, had found themselves tangled in an unexpected bond. Neither of them would have guessed that this single, strange moment would mark the beginning of something they could never have imagined. The sunlight was faint at first, a soft glow beginning to creep through the tall windows, signaling the start of a new day. Alex stirred in his sleep, a slight groan escaping his lips as he shifted in the bed, still unaware of the unusual company he had kept the night before. His muscles ached from the long day of work and celebration, and he felt the familiar heaviness of sleep pulling him deeper into rest. But something was different this morning. He could feel a weight against his chest, a soft warmth that felt out of place. He tried to move, but his body felt sluggish, as if the energy of the night before had drained him entirely. As he opened his eyes, he immediately froze. The first thing he saw was a familiar face, one he'd seen many times but never up close. Queen Sarah. Her long, dark hair framed her face, and she was resting her head on his chest, her body relaxed against his. For a moment, Alex thought he was still dreaming. The Queen, the leader of the entire planet, the one he had only seen from a distance, was here, in his bed, her breath steady and calm as she slept peacefully. Alex's heart raced in panic. What had happened? How had this situation come to be? He sat up quickly, careful not to disturb her. The soft rustling of the blankets was enough to make the Queen stir. Slowly, her eyelids fluttered open, and for a second, she blinked as though she too was coming to terms with the strange reality of the moment. Her gaze met his, and for a brief moment, they both seemed to hesitate, unsure of how to react. Alex was still trying to piece together what had happened the night before. The last thing he remembered was entering what he thought was his room, the exhaustion overwhelming him. But now, here he was, trapped in an uncomfortable silence, with the Queen lying beside him.
"Your Majesty?" Alex muttered, his voice low with a mix of confusion and embarrassment. His mind raced, searching for an explanation.
The Queen raised a hand, her fingers lightly brushing against her forehead as she slowly sat up, clearly just as disoriented as he was. Her face remained calm, but there was a flicker of surprise in her eyes.
"No need to panic," she said, her voice smooth and measured as it always was in public. But this was not the same as the formal tone she used during speeches or meetings.
There was a softness, an understanding in her voice that made Alex relax just slightly. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I must have made a mistake I didn't mean to," he trailed off, unsure of what to say. He was a soldier from Earth, not someone accustomed to such high-stakes situations or to even being in the Queen's presence like this. The Queen simply looked at him, then glanced around the room, her eyes narrowing slightly as she tried to recall the events of the previous night. "I see. Well, it appears we've both made mistakes," she replied, with a small smile that was almost unnoticeable. "It seems we were both in the wrong place at the wrong time." Alex felt a bit of tension ease from his shoulders at her calm response, but he still couldn't quite wrap his head around what was happening. The Queen of the entire planet was sitting beside him, her hair a little disheveled, her robes still elegantly draped over her shoulders, but her expression, her eyes, showed a kind of tiredness that Alex hadn't expected. She seemed human in a way he had never seen before. "You don't need to apologize," she continued, glancing at him. "It's not your fault."
"I'll admit, this is not exactly how I envisioned waking up this morning."
Her calmness made Alex feel even more awkward.
The queen was usually a picture of composure and grace, her every movement controlled, her expression carefully guarded. Seeing her so relaxed, so ordinary in this moment, made Alex feel a strange sense of connection, something he hadn't expected. "I'll leave at once," he said, scrambling to get out of bed. He didn't know how to behave in such a situation. Should he bow? Should he apologize again? Should he say nothing and just leave? But the queen placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. "Stay. Just a moment. We need to talk," she said, her voice gentle but firm. Alex hesitated, his face reddening. "Talk? About what?" "About last night," the queen said with a sigh, leaning back against the headboard. "And about what happens next?" Alex blinked, not sure he understood. "Next?"
"Yes," she said with a half-smile.
"You're not going anywhere just yet." Reluctantly, Alex sat back down, his heart still pounding in his chest. The room was quiet now, the tension in the air hanging thick. The queen seemed at ease, but Alex couldn't shake the unease in his gut. "I know this is strange," she said, her voice softer now. "But there's something about this, about you, that feels different. Do you understand?" Alex furrowed his brow, trying to make sense of her words. "Different? Yes. You're not like the others."
"You don't treat me like some untouchable ruler. It's—" She paused, as if searching for the right words.
"It's refreshing." Alex blinked again. "I don't understand," he admitted, his voice low.
"I don't treat you like anyone else. You're the queen." "I'm just a soldier." The queen's smile softened, though there was a glint in her eyes that Alex couldn't quite decipher. "Yes, but you don't look at me the way they all do. You don't seem intimidated by my title, my status. You see me for who I am, not for what I represent." Alex didn't know what to say to that. He had never thought about it that way. To him, she was just a woman in a position of power, and while he had great respect for her, he had never been one to fawn over her. In the world of soldiers, leaders were just that. Leaders, nothing more. But now, as he sat there beside her, looking into her eyes, he realized there was so much more to her than he had ever seen before. Her strength, her confidence, and her calmness had always been evident, but it wasn't until this moment that he understood the weight she carried. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said quietly, his voice tinged with an apology he hadn't expected to feel. The queen's eyes softened. "You didn't," she assured him. "I'm not upset with you, Alex, but this situation is not something I can easily forget."
Alex swallowed. He had no idea where this conversation was headed, but something told him it was going to be important.
The queen wasn't just speaking as a ruler now. She was speaking as a person, someone who was weary of her own position, of the lonely responsibilities that came with it. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of their words hanging between them. Alex could feel the tension lifting, but there was still a sense of uncertainty. What did this all mean? What was the queen really trying to say?
"I should go," Alex said again, this time more slowly.
"I don't want to make this any harder." "No," the queen said firmly, her tone soft but insistent. "I need to think." "We both do." Alex nodded slowly. He couldn't deny the strange bond that had formed between them in such a short time. It was confusing, disorienting, and yet it felt right in a way he couldn't explain. The queen sighed again and stood up, walking to the large window overlooking the palace grounds. The soft morning light illuminated her figure as she stood, still regal even in this casual moment. "I'll give you a moment to gather your thoughts," Alex said, standing as well. He felt like he was in a dream, one where things didn't make sense, but where he had no choice but to keep moving forward. "No need," the queen replied, turning to face him once more. You've already given me much to think about." Alex didn't know what she meant, but something in her eyes told him that this encounter, this strange moment between them, was only the beginning of something more. The day seemed to stretch on forever, though it had only just begun. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between him and the Queen. Something he couldn't put into words. There was an undeniable shift in the air, an undercurrent of something unspoken, but neither of them had the courage to name it. After the awkward morning, Alex had been given time to gather his thoughts, though he found that thinking was the last thing he could do. How could he think clearly when the Queen of the planet was still on his mind, her soft voice and the way she had looked at him lingering in his memory? He sat in his quarters, staring out of the window at the alien world outside, trying to focus on anything other than the woman he had unexpectedly shared a moment with. The towering structures and strange landscapes below seemed so distant, so irrelevant, as if they were a world away from the reality he now found himself in. Alex had been a soldier for most of his life. He was used to following orders, used to the rigid structure of military life, where emotions were an afterthought, a weakness. He had always kept his focus on the mission, on the goal. But now, as he sat there, the mission felt distant, almost insignificant. He had never expected something like this. He had never expected to meet someone like Queen Sarah, someone who could make him question everything he had ever known about leadership, about power, about connection. And yet, here they were, bound together by something neither of them could control. Alex could feel it in the air, that unspoken bond that had formed between them. It was not a bond of romance, not exactly, but something deeper. It was a bond born of understanding, of seeing beyond titles and expectations, of seeing each other as people. He didn't know what the Queen saw in him. To her, he was just a soldier, a tool to be used for a greater purpose. And yet, there had been that moment, that brief conversation where she had looked at him with something in her eyes that he couldn't quite define. Respect? Curiosity? Or maybe it was something else entirely. Alex sighed and stood, pacing the room. He wasn't one to dwell on things like this. Ha 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 ha! He was supposed to be a warrior, not a thinker. But now he couldn't escape the thoughts that clouded his mind. He had to admit he was drawn to her. Not because she was the Queen, not because of her title or her power, but because of who she was underneath it all. The woman he had seen that morning, the woman who had confided in him, had shared something with him.
It was a side of her that no one else had probably ever seen.
As he was lost in thought, a knock on his door interrupted his musings. He stood still for a moment, wondering if he should ignore it, but he knew that he couldn't avoid the reality of the situation any longer. "Come in," he called, his voice hoarse as he tried to regain some composure. The door opened, and there she was. Queen Sarah, dressed in her usual robes, her dark hair pulled back neatly. She looked every bit the ruler she was, yet something about the way she stood there, framed in the doorway, seemed softer, less like a queen, and more like a woman who had just shared a quiet, private moment with a stranger. "Alex," she said, her voice as steady as ever, but Alex could hear the faint hint of something else beneath it, something unspoken. "We need to talk." Alex nodded, stepping aside to let her in. He wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew that the conversation they were about to have was going to change everything. "I've been thinking," the Queen continued, her gaze steady but searching, "about our conversation this morning." Alex didn't say anything, allowing her to speak. He didn't trust himself to speak just yet. There were too many thoughts running through his mind, too many feelings he didn't know how to sort through. He could feel the weight of her presence, of her authority, but also something else, something that made her seem more like a person than a ruler. "I've never met anyone like you," she said, her voice softening just a little. "I've had many people come to me in the past, many soldiers, diplomats, visitors, but you..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "You're different." Alex blinked, unsure how to respond. He had never thought of himself as different. He was just a soldier, someone who did his job, who followed orders. But hearing her say that made him feel both humbled and confused. He wasn't sure what she meant. "I'm not sure what you mean, Your Majesty," he said carefully. The Queen sighed, her expression thoughtful. "I'm not sure I know how to explain it either. But I think we both know that there's something between us. Something more than just formalities. You've seen me as I am, not as a queen, not as a ruler. And I think, for the first time in a long while, I'm seeing someone who doesn't just want something from me." Alex felt a weight settle in his chest at her words. He had always believed that people saw him as just another soldier, another tool for the cause. But here was this powerful woman, this queen, seeing something in him that no one else ever had. "I don't want anything from you," he said quietly, meeting her gaze. "I'm just trying to do my job. But I respect you. For who you are. Not your title, not your power. Just you." The Queen seemed to soften at his words, a hint of a smile playing at the corner of her lips. "It's strange," she said, almost to herself. "I've spent my life surrounded by people who want something from me. Advisors, soldiers, ambassadors. Everyone wants something, but you don't. It's a rare feeling." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was comfortable, yet filled with a tension neither could ignore. There was so much left unsaid, so many things that neither of them were ready to acknowledge. And yet, there was a part of them that both understood each other in a way no one else ever could. "I didn't expect any of this," Alex said, breaking the silence. "I didn't expect to be here, to be having this conversation. I didn't expect to be thinking about you like this." The Queen turned her head slightly, her eyes searching his face. "And what is it you're thinking?" Alex hesitated, unsure how to put it into words. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But I can't ignore it. There's something between us, something I can't explain. But I don't think it's just about being a soldier and a queen anymore. It's something else."
The Queen looked away for a moment, as if collecting her thoughts. "I don't know what to do with this either," she said softly, almost to herself.
"But I can't pretend it's not there." Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that, for the first time, the Queen was speaking, not as a ruler, but as someone who was just human. Someone who had feelings, who struggled, who was not so different from him after all. "I don't know what this means," Alex said, his voice low. "But I think we need to figure it out." "I think you're right," she replied. They stood there for a moment, the weight of their words hanging between them. There was so much uncertainty, so much unknown in what had just been said. But there was also something else, something undeniable, something that neither of them could escape. And for the first time in a long while, neither of them felt so alone. The days that followed were filled with a quiet tension neither Alex nor the Queen could ignore. The time they had spent talking, learning about each other, had left a mark on both of them. They had shared something rare, something that went beyond duty, beyond titles, beyond the rigid roles they had been born into. And yet, the reality of their positions never truly left them. Alex was still a soldier. The Queen was still the Queen. There was still a war to fight, an entire planet to protect. The future of her people weighed on her shoulders, and the burden of leadership was something she could never escape, no matter how much she might wish it. For Alex, the conflict wasn't as immediate, but he still carried the same weight. The responsibility to follow orders, to stay focused, to be the soldier he had always been trained to be. His life had always been about the mission. He had never allowed himself to think about anything else, certainly not anything personal. But everything had changed since that morning when he had woken up beside the Queen. Each time he saw her, whether in the halls of the palace or across a table during one of the meetings, it was as if the world shifted. Her presence was commanding, yet there was a softness in her eyes now, a quiet vulnerability that she hadn't shown before. They both knew that they were walking a fine line, balancing the connection they had formed with the weight of their responsibilities. Alex spent more time in his room than he had in days, trying to process the whirlwind of emotions that had become a constant presence in his mind. He found himself thinking about her, thinking about their conversations, about the moments they had shared, and wondering where they would lead. Meanwhile, Queen Sarah was no different. She had always been a figure of strength, a ruler to be respected and feared. But now she found herself facing a challenge she hadn't anticipated, a personal conflict that threatened to undo everything she had worked for. The weight of leadership had never felt so heavy, but it wasn't because of the war, or the politics, or the endless demands of her people. It was because of Alex. She had always prided herself on her ability to remain detached, to separate herself from the people she led. But something had changed. He had shown her a side of herself that she had long buried, and now she couldn't stop thinking about him. He was a soldier, nothing more, yet he had become something much more to her. It was a strange feeling, one that she hadn't been able to shake. And now, as the days grew longer, as the pressure of the war mounted, she couldn't ignore the pull between them. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft glow over the palace grounds, the queen found herself in the garden, walking alone. The air was cool, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air. She had come here to think, to clear her mind. But as always, her thoughts returned to Alex. She hadn't seen him all day. He had been busy with his duties, as had she. They had barely spoken, though both of them had stolen glances across the room whenever they had a chance. It was a strange game they played, one neither of them had the courage to admit. But today, as the weight of the evening settled in, the queen knew she couldn't keep pretending. She walked deeper into the garden, letting the coolness of the evening surround her. Her mind was filled with thoughts of Alex, of the things he had said, of the way he had looked at her. She hadn't realized how much she needed someone who could see her for who she truly was, someone who didn't care about her title, who didn't want anything from her, who could simply accept her as she was. "Your Majesty!" a voice called from behind her, interrupting her thoughts. The queen turned, her heart skipping a beat. There he was, Alex, standing at the edge of the garden, looking as uncertain as she felt. He had clearly been looking for her. His face was serious, but his eyes softened when he saw her. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said, stepping closer.
"I thought you might be here." The queen didn't respond immediately. She simply stared at him, taking in the sight of him standing there.
He wasn't just a soldier to her anymore. He wasn't just some tool of war. He was something more. "You didn't intrude," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking about everything, about us." Alex took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. He didn't speak, not yet. He wanted to hear what she had to say. "I don't know what this is," the queen continued, her voice trembling slightly. "But I can't deny that it's something. I've spent my life surrounded by people who only see me as a queen, as a ruler. But with you, I don't feel like I have to hide. I don't have to be the person everyone expects me to be." Alex's heart pounded as he stepped closer to her. He had never seen her like this before. He had always known her to be strong, confident, and unshakable. But now, standing before him, she was vulnerable, exposed in a way that he had never imagined. "I don't know what this means," she said, her eyes locking onto his. "But I know that it's real. And I can't ignore it anymore." Alex reached out, his hand gently brushing hers. The touch was simple, but it sent a jolt of electricity through both of them. The queen's breath caught in her throat as she met his gaze.
"I feel the same," Alex said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what this means either, but I can't pretend that it's not there." For a long moment, neither of them spoke.
The world around them seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them standing in the quiet garden. There was no need for words now. They both knew what they were feeling, and in that moment, they both understood that things had changed.
I don't want to complicate things, the Queen said quietly, breaking the silence. I have a planet to rule, a war to fight.
There are responsibilities I can't ignore, but... She hesitated. But I also don't want to push you away. Alex nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words.
I get it. We have our duties.
But maybe, just for a moment, we don't have to think about that. The Queen smiled softly, a hint of sadness in her eyes. Maybe, but whatever happens, we can't forget who we are. Alex took a deep breath, stepping closer to her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. I don't think we ever could. They stood together in the silence, both of them knowing that they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Their relationship, whatever it was, could never return to what it had been. But as the sun set and the stars began to appear in the sky, they both understood that this was only the beginning of something new. The Queen and the soldier had found something rare, something worth holding on to. In a world filled with expectations, with duties and responsibilities, they had found a connection. And no matter what the future held, that connection was something neither of them would ever forget.